Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Playbook. Today is a day that I have been looking forward to for quite some time. We are joined by the man, the myth, the legend, head coach of U of H's baseball team, Todd Whitting. Coach, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. We've been trying to put this thing together for a while, so I'm glad we finally made it work with our season and recruiting and portal and all the fun things that go on in the summertime and the camps. That carve out a little time and knock this out. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm not as glad as I am, so I do appreciate it. And I know you're a busy man, so
Yeah, it's
for
here. Sure.
starters, for those of you who aren't familiar with Coach, Coach actually is a somewhat of a unicorn by the standards of Rise Game in the Playbook, in a sense that not only did he play baseball throughout his life, he played at the University of Houston, and then got to turn around, then got to go back to U of H and join the staff as head coach. So he's getting to coach at his alma mater. During his career, he's been a part of programs that have won 21 conference regular season tournament championships while competing in 17 NCAA regionals, 6 super regionals, and an NCAA College World Series. I'd say that's a pretty busy career, Coach.
Yeah, I've luckily been surrounded by a lot of great coaches and a lot of great players, but it's been fun, and we got more to come too. That's for sure.
That's what I love to hear. Well, thanks again for joining us. Really the point of the playbook, Coach, is to bring the experiences of folks like you to the folks like me that have kids and were involved in youth sports, and kind of hearing some good stories, hearing the what to dos and the what not to dos. So I'd like to. There's some folks that watch the podcast that have thrown in some questions that I wanted to kind of dive into, if you don't mind.
Oh, great. Sure, absolutely.
Perfect. All right. So, first question. This is more of a personal question. So, Coach, take us back to your own Little League days or youth baseball days. What kind of player were you? And any favorite baseball memory that sticks with you today?
My upbringing in the baseball world was probably a little different than most folks because we didn't have high school baseball until I was a junior. We were I was born in Tyler. Family lived in Tyler. When I was 11 years old, my stepdad was a railroad, worked for the railroad. So we were shipped out to Dalhart, Texas, about an hour and a half north of Amarillo, and to a little town out there. And baseball was always my passion when I was a little kid growing up. And, I played Rose Capital Little League in Tyler, and then I played for my dad in the summer times down in White House Little League. But I would go up to when we moved to Dalhart. We had a league there, but it wasn't real organized. I mean, you can imagine it's the epitome of rural America. And for me, what I would do is I would go back every summer and play ball for my dad. I did that for 4 or 5 years until I was about 15, 16 years old, and then played. We had what was called Babe Ruth back then. Played a summer or two of Babe Ruth, but it wasn't anything spectacular or really competitive. It was a lot of had to work on my own. I always knew I can remember my brothers and I, when I was 10, 11, 12 in the summertime back at my dad's house, we would dig into the College World Series and we were obsessed with it. And that's back in the day when the Cubs played only day games. I'm an old guy. And we would literally watch the Cubs play. We'd watch the College World Series or the Cubs play every single day. And my dad was the president of the league out there. So, 4 or 5 o'clock, he would get home and we'd head out to the ballpark and stay out there all night, just about every night in the summertime. So, that's kind of how for me, it really started. And my dad obviously was very instrumental in getting me going and the love for the game with him running our little league there in White House. But I'm actually graduated from Dalhart High School, and one thing to this day that I'm extremely thankful for is a man by the name of Earl Smith. Earl was one of the coaches there in Dalhart, and Earl had great passion for baseball as well, but we didn't have baseball. And he went on a campaign a year or two before he started a year or two before I was a junior. In my junior year, he got that program up and running at Dalhart, and we were a 3A school out in the Panhandle. Some of the other teams in our district did play, but we didn't. And back then it was all football and track. In springtime you played football in the fall, and you ran track in the spring, and some guys played basketball. But track was kind of it was kind of a training ground for the football program, and I played high school football as well. But it had not been for Earl Smith, I mean, he literally changed my life. And
Wow.
by him starting, he and I were very, very close up until his passing. And still this day, I'm actually going back to Dalhart in about 2 weeks for 35th high school reunion. I plan on, stopping there and saying hi to Mrs. Smith. She still lives there in Dalhart, but he's single-handedly probably changed the whole course of my life by um, getting that program started. We had 2 great years there at Dalhart. We won district both years, advanced a couple of rounds one year. And that led to, I was fortunate, obviously I wasn't getting recruited a whole lot. And I'm at a place where they don't play baseball. And I think summers, I think in high school that I actually didn't even play. But luckily my dad, who was kind of one of the pioneers in select baseball, this is back in about 88 or 89. He had one of the first select teams in East Texas. He had probably the first team in East Texas. And he got to know Bragg Stockton, who's the former head coach here. And they became real good buddies. And literally the way I got to University of Houston is Bragg was holding a camp in White House during the Christmas holidays. And I would go down and visit my dad during Christmas. And that I went to that camp, met Bragg, worked out for him. I think it was in a gym. I don't think it was so cold. I think we could get outside. And this is my senior year, and it's getting late, and I'm kind of hoping I can go. Frank Phillips Junior College out in Borger had just started a program. I was hoping to be able to get in there. The University of Texas Pan Am at the time was recruiting me a little bit, but that was really about it. And then go to that camp in White House. Coach Stockton's there along with his camp staff, his son Russell. And really didn't hear much after him. And then it was probably 2 or 3 months after that is when Rainer Noble, who was the assistant at the time, gave me a call. And between he and Coach Stockton, they offered me a scholarship, and that's how I ended up at the University of Houston as an 18-year-old right out of Dalhart, Texas, from town of 5,500 to the big city of Houston. And it was definitely a culture shock. But so my path is a little different than things go now. It was, it's truly, when I sit back and think about it, it's crazy that I actually ended up at this point, um, just with my baseball upbringing, with the fact that Dalhart didn't have baseball, it wasn't a big deal up there. But, I knew internally, I said back in those days, we'd watch. I knew I wanted to be a college baseball coach my whole life. I knew I was never, I was 5'8", a buck 55 when I graduated from high school. I could run okay, hit okay, but I was average at all of them, and I was very fortunate to get a scholarship to Houston. But I knew I wanted to coach my entire life. There was never any other option for me onto what I was going to do. So, I've had a lot of people help me along the way. My family, my parents, my mom, stepdad, dad, and stepmom always were very, they were very supportive. And then obviously Earl Smith. And then, of course, Bragg Stockton comes along and gives me an opportunity along with Rainer Noble. And then, played 4 years at Houston. Actually had 1 year stint at Navarro. I was kind of got farmed out. I was hurt for a couple of years and played at Navarro College for a year. Then came back to Houston and finished up. And when I came back, played for Rainer for a year, and then was fortunate that Coach Noble gave me the opportunity to go on his staff. I think I was a full-time assistant at 22 years old, literally the year after I finished playing. So, and then it was just kind of the rest is history. It's those early days coaching here at Houston. It was not like it is now. We didn't have turf. We didn't have that beautiful clubhouse. We had a brand new stadium. I think that stadium opened in 95 or 96, and that's about the time I graduated. So it was me and Coach Couch were the two assistant coaches. There was no admin, there was no field guys, there was no marketing. It was just basically me, Rainer, and Tripp. I had a dream to get this thing cranked up, and I was the field. I got to be the field guy. I mowed and sharpen a real mower and ride a triplex and fix sprinklers and fertilizer programs and all that. And Tripp went out and did most of the recruiting, and Rainer ran the program. And you look up, and we won our first title, I think, in '97 in Conference USA, or after the Southwest Conference broke up. And we went on a pretty good run there. I was assistant here for 8 years. 3 of my last 4, we were in, 1 game away from Omaha, and we were rocking and rolling. And then got the call from Coach Schlossnagel, who's now the head coach at Texas. He and I were dueling recruiting coordinators. Tripp had left by this time, and I was a recruiting coordinator here. And Coach Slosh and he was at Tulane at the time, and we were Conference USA rivals. And got, when you're on that circuit back then, you're literally with the same people every weekend. Everybody's at the same tournaments, watching the same players. It's kind of, I can still to this day, back in those days, remember exactly where I was every weekend, every summer, because literally for about 10 years, it didn't change where you went. You were always going to Dallas for the Mustang tournament. We had a great one here. You had Austin for the Austin Wings tournament. You had one in Memphis that was a pretty big deal. And then you went up to Joplin, and then Atlanta. All the perfect game stuff started right after that. But was fortunate to get the opportunity to go to TCU. I really felt like if I was going to come back, I'd been here, as a player for 5 years, a coach for 8. I was at 13 years in at the University of Houston and was still relatively young. And I always felt like if I was going to come back as the head coach, was my ultimate goal, career goal, was to be the head coach here. I had to leave, and when I left Houston and went to TCU, people thought I was nuts because I think they had been to 2 regionals in the entire history of the program. They just opened up a new stadium, but they really had no history or tradition of winning baseball there at the level that we were winning at Houston. But I knew it could be a good place, and Jim and I had been longtime friends. I knew what he was about, so took the job at TCU, and I was there 7 years, went to 7 straight regionals, and we capped it off with a trip to Omaha in 2010, which was the last year of Rosenblatt Stadium. And had it not been for a couple of guys named Cole and Bauer, we might have won the whole thing. But all there at the end
Yeah.
to knock out that championship series. But finished up in Omaha in 10. It was a Sunday night. Mac Rhodes called me, right after we got done there. And I think by Wednesday, Thursday that next week, I was the head coach at Houston. And 16 years later, here we are doing a podcast. And we're still rock and rolling. And I love this place as much as I ever have. It's near and dear to me. It's a really special place. And, you got awesome people around here. We got great leadership with Dr. Couture, now with Eddie Nunez as our athletics director, Alvin Franklin, who's my sport admin, and a whole other host of administrators that are tremendously supportive. But I think really what, a side note that kind of makes this program go is the fans and the supporters of the program. I've been tremendously blessed over the last 16 years. I don't know how many millions we've spent on our ballpark. I know we've got a new clubhouse opened a couple years ago. We've done turf, lights, video board, so on and so forth. But you're talking millions and millions of dollars of private money that has gone into this program. Obviously the biggest gift we've had is Daryl Schrader. His name is on our ballpark. Don Sanders. It's Schrader Park at Don Sanders Field. The clubhouse down there. So many people that helped get that thing off the ground and built. Every little section of that clubhouse has somebody's name on it. They donated from $25,000 on up to millions of dollars. So it's that's one thing that I really wear on my sleeve and have an affinity for the people that are here, and that have helped me all along the way get this program, to where it is now. And it becomes a thing where you really want to win for them, and that's what I, every day when I get out of bed, it's like, all right, we got to keep working to get this place to Omaha because there's so many people that are invested in what we're doing here.
Wow. First of all, thank you for that background and that kind of trip down memory lane. It segues nicely into this second question. Me as a dad, right, that has a, I guess now baseball age 11U son this year in the fall, to see this evolution that somebody's gone through in this sport. I mean, it's really amazing. And for those of you watching that can see the wall behind Coach, it's got a lot of impressive stats and figures on there. So take a look at those. But no, thanks, Coach. I mean, next question would be, how big of a change, right? Like you mentioned your childhood playing baseball in a small town.
Right.
And now you're in Houston. What do you see in today's youth baseball environment that is a big change from, what you saw when you played as a kid?
Well, I think the opportunities these kids have now is awesome. I mean, I've had 2 sons who had the opportunity to go to Cooperstown, and play in that tournament up there as 12U district players in Bel Air. And wow, that was really cool. You go up there and you stay. It's almost like a camp. You stay in the cabins. You get to go check out the Hall of Fame, and just opportunities like that. The tournaments they play in, the fields they play on. I mean, trust me, when I was playing in Dalhart and White House, I mean, I'm out there picking rocks at shortstop all the time, just trying not to take one in the face. And these kids are playing on turf fields and with LED lights and all this stuff. So, to me, that's pretty cool that they get the opportunity to do those kind of things, the trips they get to make. I know, I had a son that came up playing for the Houston Banditos when he was in high school. He was a 22 grad catcher. They ended up playing at Blinn, and they went on to win a national championship while he was playing there. But those trips. We didn't have those trips when I was a kid. They're almost like family vacations, but it's times 2, 3, 4, 5 of them in the summertime, and we did that for years with Matt, and that was really cool. We talk about that all the time, how we kind of miss those trips. That's the same trips I'm on every summer, right? Going to the Perfect Game and going to PBR and the five tool stuff and all the different events around the country now. But to get to do that with your kid was pretty cool, because we go get an Airbnb and we're washing laundry and I'm running out there to watch other teams play. But at the same time, I got to watch my kid playing all those tournaments that I've been recruiting for so many years. So that was really kind of cool. But just the opportunities they get now, to me, is the biggest change. It's and none of them, you hope none of the kids take it for granted, because there's a lot of money spent, and there's a lot of time. And I know, I know what we spend as a family to go make those trips. And, the time together was awesome, but you're also time away from work. So, if there's any kids listening to this, tell your mom and dad thanks, because it's a huge financial commitment these days to play on these tournament teams and travel all over the country.
Yeah, I mean, I was joking with somebody the other day. I grew up in Deer Park,
Mm.
southeast side of Houston, and refinery territory. And we used to. You had back then. You had Little League and you had Optimist, and
Yeah.
I can speak from the Optimist standpoint that you had a jersey with a number, and that was
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
No
you
doubt.
you didn't have a car payment, sitting in a bat bag. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah. No question. No question. It's expensive.
Yeah. So, all right. Next question. We get into kind of the development side. This
Yeah.
question is at the youth level. What should development look like? Is it more about skill? Is it more about game IQ, or is it just reps, reps, reps?
I'm more on the rep side. That's what I tell a lot of parents. I do think that, you know, there's a lot of, you go to the Little League games, and I've been to a lot of them with my kids, and you hear a lot of um, teaching and opinions and things coming out of the stands when a kid's trying to compete. And that I would always, for me, when my kids were playing, I would go down the right field line that way, because it's hard for me not to say something, right? And I would try to get out. I would try to stay out of their way as much as I can, and let them. To me, that's what practices are for. And if you I always thought that if my kid didn't play well, um, as long as he gave effort, that it wasn't always his fault. I took it upon myself that it was my fault, that I hadn't worked with him enough in the backyard, or I'm fortunate to have a batting cage right out here. To me, if you wait till the game till you start doing the teaching, it's too late. The game is supposed to be fun. That's the same thing I tell my team. The practices are mine, the games are theirs. My job is to have them prepared for the game. So I own practice. I own the practice plan. I own the reps, what we're doing each and every day. And that way, when we get to the games, you turn them loose, and we're doing a little bit of managing. That's about it. So, preparation starts before the game starts. You can't just run out there and get a little BP and take some fungos right before the game and expect to be better. It's a repetition sport. And that's what I tell everybody. You just gotta, with kids that are up to 12 years old, it's gotta just be basic, and the fundamental that probably gets lost the most is the throwing. And that's one you got to put a ball in a kid's hand as soon as they can do it, and just make them throw and throw and throw and throw. And you can worry about grip later. You can worry about where they're stepping later, but just have them throw that thing as hard and as far as they can. And as they get older, you kind of start bringing things back into focus a little bit. But it's all reps. With hitting, it's the same thing. It's if you just get them in the right stance at this level, in the college level, I very rarely do I even talk about swings. But I do hear a lot of swing things at the ballparks, you know, this and that and this and that. And really, the swing is a natural swing. I always thought that, my job as a hitting guy is to put my players in a position to fire off their best natural swing. And that's usually with stance and the first movement, right? Stance, grip. That's where it all starts. So when you have a 5, 6, 7, 8 year old, if you can just get their feet in the right place, you're doing well, right? Just get their feet, get them to be able to repeat. Because I see it out in camp all the time. A kid will be hitting off the tee, and he'll have his feet are going all over the place, and you can't expect to get a good result if your feet aren't in the right spot, your weight's not in the right place, which enables you to fire off that swing. So to me, it's just reps. I mean, it's get them out in the backyard with a tee and wiffle balls and just hit and hit and hit and hit and just make sure they're in a good stance and make sure they have a good first move away from the ball. And also the grip is important as well. And then fielding is, fielding, you can get a little more technical with that, I think, because there are some things that can help you. But you know, hand-eye is hard to teach, and kids get hand-eye at different ages. And I think I saw a study one time where smaller children really are kind of in a tunnel vision, right? And as we get older, our peripheral gets better. That's why you see, like in coach pitch, if you got a big tall dad, it's hard for the kids to hit the ball because the ball is out of their vision and back in their vision, to where you almost be better off to get on a knee and just throw it that way. you know and same thing with the machine. That's why you got to have the machine down low at some of those ages, because if it's up high, the kids can't see the ball. But really, it's just, to me, it's rep it out. Get the basic fundamentals down, and just keep repping and repping and repping, and then make it fun. That's one thing we do in camp, and I've done with my kids is, put the ball in a tee and see if you can hit it over the fence. And put the ball in a tee and see if you can hit a target. Put a ball in the tee and see if you can swing and hit the dog over there, or whatever, and or hit your little brother with the little plastic ball. Just make it fun for them. But I'll never forget one time Matt was in a kind of a little slump when he was probably, I don't know, maybe 10, 11 years old. And, I took him over to the T-ball field and threw him BP and just let him hit a bunch of balls over the fence, because that's what makes, that's what everybody likes in baseball, is the homer. And it's obviously, I'm not a big proponent of the upward swing and things like that. I think there's a balance between the two, but it was just a confidence deal that he could drive the baseball and actually see it go over a fence. He was kind of an undersized guy. And he goes right back out into his regular field and starts playing well again. So it's all, a lot of it's mental too. It's, for me, even this team on the college level, there's three areas when you're teaching fundamentals. There's mechanics, right? There's swing mechanics, fielding mechanics, throwing mechanics. There's mental game, okay, and there's approach. Mental game is your mental outlook, your confidence, things like that. The approach is what you swing at and why you swing at it. And for me, the order of importance with those is mental game, approach, and mechanics is the very last one. Yet, what do you see most people working on all the time that they're consumed with is mechanics. And I think if you flip that, and instead of going mechanics, approach, mental game, if you go mental game, approach, mechanics, you're going to find a lot more success. Because confidence is a choice. And you can inject confidence into people. People can have confidence on their own, or you can inject confidence into them. The biggest one is, or one that's just as important, is approach. It happens with our guys all the time. I'll have kids sometimes, they'll go out and they maybe go, because we do a lot with quality at bats. Okay. We try to get away from the actual hits and stat numbers. All those will reflect, if you have no quality ABs, your batting average is going to reflect it. Right. But, they'll line out to second, hit a power ground ball to short, deep fly ball, to center field, to the warning track that's well hit, and maybe one strikeout. Well, in their mind, they're 0 for 4. In my mind, they're 3 for 4 as far as quality at bats go. But you'll see that kid run straight down to the cage, after the game is over, and just distraught because he went 0 for 4. Well, you had 3 really good at bats. So you got to keep in mind what the process is and what to get away from the results. And did you have a quality at bat? Because approach is, if it doesn't matter how much time you spend that cage, if you don't identify spin and speed, and you're swinging and chasing pitches all over the zone, it doesn't matter how pretty that swing is, it's not going to work. So to me, for young hitters, learning what they can hit, what they can handle, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and just continue to work on those, and make hitting simple. Make it simple. Look for one pitch in one spot. Especially on the youth levels, they don't throw a lot of strikes. And if you get to walk down to first, you get to walk. You don't have to walk, right? So, take those walks whenever they're there. But I think, just learning the game is really the thing that we find is the hardest struggle with young kids in our program, is just, how to wear cuts and relays. And we have great high school coaches in Houston, around the state of Texas, but, base running and the little things, the cuts and relays, and situational offense, situational defense. Even though you may be the best hitter on your little league team or your high school team, you better learn how to bunt, because we on the college level, you may go from the 4 hole to the 8 or 9 hole, and you're going to have to do some of those things, right? Everybody can't hit third. So, but back to your original thing, I just think knowing the information as a parent or as a youth coach, and just rep. I love to see when I go out to league parks and there's stations set up everywhere. and it's a wiffle ball station, maybe a little short hop station, and then you got a BP station, and you got live BP going on the field. Yet you look over on the field next to them, and you see 8 kids standing in the outfield and 1 kid hitting, right? And that's where baseball honestly becomes boring for kids. And they quit playing, because they're not getting any action. It's not fun. It's no fun just to stand out there and watch your friend hit, right? So the more you can get them interactive within practice to make things fun, to keep things moving fast pace, I think that it advances development even quicker.
Yeah, well put. You mentioned kind of keeping these kids engaged, right? In a
Mhm.
practice setting. Let's go to the parents.
Sure,
um,
sure.
and let's talk about the mid-range age-wise group of kids. So let's call it your pre-pitching, and then the kids that are just kind of getting into pitching. So it's kind of that 7, 8, 9 age group.
Mhm.
I've noticed in the organizations that I'm a part of, and president of our local little league. I'm always watching the parents, right? And it's interesting because I see things that stop me and at some point, like, man, this kid's a little young to be yelling or getting on them that hard, right?
Yeah,
There's some that they don't know what to say, like what approach to take. They just want their kid to do good. And
yeah,
then there's some that are like me that I did not know. I mean, I played baseball, but I grew up in a basketball family, right? So this whole journey with my son is quite frankly why I developed a Rise game, right? To help parents that maybe don't have all of the knowledge up front. But
right.
with that age group, I mean, what would you tell parents in terms of how to basically just be around and react to their kids, based on what you've seen, maybe based on what you've done with your kids, and maybe what was done with you, right?
Well, it's hard, because nobody wants to see their kid fail. And I've got 5 kids, and I hate you don't ever want to see them fail, but failure is also losing is learning, right? And failure is learning. And the game of baseball, it'll break your heart. It's broken mine for 28 years now, a lot of times. But I think the main thing I looked for with all my kids, no matter what they're doing, is that their effort was good. If they played hard, that's my biggest thing. If you play hard and you play bad, hey, let's get back in the cage. Let's get back on the basketball court, the football field, the golf course, the driving range, whatever it is, and let's figure it out. But as long as you give me great effort, that's my main concern. And if you do that more times than not, you're going to come out of whatever little slump you're in or whatever if you're not playing good. But just play hard. That's the best thing. Now, if they didn't play hard, they knew when they got in that car, it was going to come down on them a little bit. Because I'm not. It's like, hey, you're representing me. You're representing yourself. You're representing your team, your family, and so on and forth, so forth. You got all this equipment in the back of my truck. I spend my time taking you to practice. I spend my time coming to your games. The least you can do is give me great effort. And if you don't want to do it, let's go try something different. Let's go try a different sport or a different hobby. If you don't really love what you're doing. So, to me, that's when you have to hold it. That's life in general. If you don't put, enthusiasm is one of our core values in my program, and if you don't have enthusiasm for what you're doing, you're not going to be successful. And you look at, that's what I tell the players all the time is, you can't tell me one person successful in any realm of anything that doesn't have great enthusiasm. And there's even bad people in the world. They're enthusiastic about what they do, and great leaders are enthusiastic, and sport athletes are the top line are enthusiastic. So enthusiasm is a big one for me, and that's a choice whether to do that or not. But not taking at bat to at bat. The mental side of it's what I was talking about, being able to to strike out. Hey, I remember when I was a kid, I'd strike out and I'd be crying like crazy. And I remember making errors in high school and being so mad. I almost felt like my head was going to blow off. And that's where I think I got better in college. And I learned as a college coach to, go one pitch at a time. And you can't. There's a reason why your windshield in your car is bigger than your rearview mirror, right? Your rearview mirror, you have it, but it's very tiny. You can see what's behind you, but that's learning. But what's in front of you, okay, is what's in the windshield, right? And that's why you have this big windshield, this tiny rearview mirror. is you learn from that stuff in the past, but it's gone, it's behind you, and now you're focusing on what's ahead. And that's the hardest thing for young athletes to do, and parents. I see, parents will hold the kid will strike out with bases loaded, and they're stammering and hollering, and kind of pacing all over the ballpark. And I get it. It's you don't want to see failure, and you don't want to see your kid fail, but life is about a lot of failures. I mean, like it or not, it's not easy, and baseball is not an easy game. It's a very hard game, and I think the sooner you understand that and are able to deal with that, and it goes back to too, if my kids didn't play well, did I prepare them? It's obviously the coach's job to prepare them, but it's also as a parent, if I have the resources or the ability, to help them to get better, whether it's even if it's just putting, like I said, a tee in the backyard, or I had a pitch back when I was little. I don't know if they make those things anymore. I'd wear those things out, and or just throwing a ball against a wall, whatever a kid has to do, to make sure they have the environment around them to get better. Because success is going to want to, they're going to want to play more if they're successful. If they keep failing and they feel like there's, a stare on them all the time, or there's a lot of pressure on them, that's why you see so many kids that give up, the game. And it's every sport. I mean, you see it go like this as kids get older. Everybody plays T-ball, pretty good amount play 12-year-old, 12U, and they get to 13, 14. Literally about half the kids go away, and it keeps doing that all the way to high school. And for whatever reason, kids, get different interests. They like different sports. They play the piano or pick up the guitar, something they like to do. But I think as a parent, it's not, you just support them and just make sure they're playing hard, and then make sure that all, between games or between practices, they're getting their reps in. Baseball is like a test. Okay. It's or like a video game. Okay. The first time you put a video game in, when you get the new whatever, I don't play video games, but the first one, as soon as you put it in and push start, you die, right? Or you wreck. And the longer you play it, guess what happens? The better you get at it.
Yep.
And baseball, or every sport, everything you do everything's like that. The more you do it, the more you practice it in the right framework and right little package, the better you're going to get at it, and the faster you're going to get good at it. So baseball is no different than that. So, it's another thing that happens too at those ages you're talking about is development of kids is so different. You talk about swings and mechanics and things like that, and you've got an 8-year-old that can barely pick up the bat. Well, he's not going to have a good swing because he physically cannot swing. The bat is swinging him. He's not swinging the bat. Or you got these other kids who are usually the better players in Little League, who are big old strong, and they're a little more advanced, and they can get that barrel through there. Their arms are stronger. They can pitch faster. They can throw the ball all the way across the infield. So a lot of that, as a parent, you have to understand. You got to look at your kids and say, all right, what are the tools I'm dealing with here? Because we get a lot of kids in camp, and my kids were the same way, to where there's nothing wrong with their swing. Their bat speed is what it is, but they're just physically weak. So, hey, how about we do some push-ups, or do some pull-ups, or do something to try to get a little bit stronger. But a lot of that's going to just naturally happen over time. And, it's, I can remember, and this happens a lot, to where, and I watch this on my kids' baseball teams, where the better players aren't always the guys at 12, or not the guys that end up playing in college or even on the high school team. I mean, I thought, Matt, my son, I'm pretty realistic about where he was. And when he was 12, out of 13, 14 district players, I thought he was about 10 or 11, at 12 years old, and then by the time it all shakes out at the end of the day, he's one of a couple that played on that team that actually played college baseball, so you just don't really know what you have until they hit 13, 14, 15 and start getting going. So, you look back now at all those, the things that in Little League that went on, and that was so stressful, and it's such a big deal. And now my kids are, he's 22 years old, and things don't really matter anymore, but what does matter is the time we spent at the ballpark and playing catch, and the time in the batting cage and all that kind of stuff that is really cool. So I think, hold them accountable to effort, rep them out as much as you can, and sit back and get you some popcorn and a Diet Coke and enjoy the game.
I love it. I do like me some popcorn. I talked to a parent. This story always kind of comes and stays in mind, but this is when we were in the kind of 8-9-year-old age range, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a parent that was inquiring about like just playing baseball year round. So this was a parent that had gone into the select, world, was on a really good team, had a great experience, but by the time they got to 9 years old, there was a little more of kind of a push to get their son to play baseball, right? Mm. And so there's we do multi-sport kind of in our household, but predominantly baseball with my son. What are your thoughts on multi-sport at the young age? Is it important to continue to do that, or at what point do you start kind of maybe focusing on a singular sport?
I mean, I'm from the old school probably. I mean, I played football and baseball in high school, and I actually played high school golf and high school baseball at the same time, same season. I played golf tournaments on Monday and played baseball on Tuesdays and Fridays in high school. And I think you develop I think you develop more as an athlete the more different movement patterns you learn at a very, very young age. At that 10, 11, 12 age is when kids develop speed. And when I'm talking about speed, I'm talking about movement patterns, but also swing speed, arm speed, and whether in any sport you have, swing speed with a golf club is developed at that age, swing speed with a bat is developed at that age, but you got to have strength to do it. I'm a huge proponent of youth football. I love youth football. My kids played it. I played it. And they played, basketball. I was terrible at basketball, but I played it just because it got me. It was in the wintertime. It's so cold in Dalhart. You had something, got me moving around. I didn't do it in high school, but I think the more sports playing golf, I mean, the more things the more different movement patterns you learn, when you're a defensive back in football, a running back in football, those aren't typical movement patterns for baseball, but they can help you as far as lateral quickness and explosiveness. And you learn lessons in those sports as well. I mean, I think you get knocked on your tail in football, you learn some life lessons, for sure. And I learned plenty of them when I was in high school. I know that, and a kid. So, yeah, I think you play everything. Um, some of the best players I've had have been high school football players, dual sport athletes. I've had first round picks that were and second round picks that were high school quarterbacks or high school whatevers, and ended up and played baseball in college. And I think you learn baseball is such an individual team sport, right? It's hard to really grasp the whole team's concept sometimes. But when you play football or basketball or any of these soccer, these team sports, you really learn to work. You have to work as a unit. You have plays you run, right? In baseball, we don't have plays. We have pitches we throw. We react to or we anticipate and react to situations that are created when the ball's put in play. You have bunt plays and bunt coverages, but for the most part, as far as moving the ball, you don't have a playbook where you do in the other sports. So I think learning that team concept is really helpful. And plus it gives kids a break. I mean, if you just do something the same thing over and over, day in and day out, you're going to get tired of it. And a lot of those kids, I do think that do just play one sport starting at an early age. You look up, and that's what I talked about earlier, where it starts to do this with the kids that play baseball. Those are some of the first ones that jump out just because they're tired of doing it. They get burnt out, and it's real.
Yeah. Well, great insight. We're going to wrap it up with one of my favorite parts. This is more of kind of the fun rapid fire questions.
Mm-hmm.
And for anybody watching, by the way, I'm going to put our QR code up in the top left. This is where you can follow us. You can continue to watch our podcasts. Thank you for supporting us. And please feel free to check out the app. So, Coach.
I'm going to do it right now.
I love it. Thank you. So, rapid fire question number one. This is one of my favorites. What's your favorite baseball movie of all time?
It's Bull Durham for sure.
Yeah.
It's just classic show. And, some of the nuances in there. I think For Love of the Game is another one that really dives in with Kevin Costner. If you really watch that movie, there's some great mental game stuff in there. And even Moneyball. I mean, you watch Moneyball and some of the small nuances, they're pretty advanced. A lot of people won't catch them, but a lot of things that go on in Moneyball are very true. And, just kind of just watching how that whole movie unfolded and, and knowing some of the people that were in that movie, that were played in that movie, like Ron Washington and kind of how his insight, it was really kind of funny how they portrayed him well, and Billy Bean, all those things. It was really cool. But the old throwback is always, there's so many good ones. I mean, you got The Natural. I mean, my gosh, one of the greatest movies ever. But there's so many great ones out there, Major League with Willie Mays Hayes and Charlie Sheen and those guys. And, of course, there's a lot of good baseball movies out there.
There's still a great debate in the Warren household about when my son can watch Major League. We're 2 years past where we should have been, in my opinion, but I'm losing that battle. So, All right, you've been around. I think I saw somewhere that you would basically have advised well over 100, if not hundreds, of players that have gone to the most elite level in the
Right.
pros. Out of all the players you've been around, what is the craziest thing that you have seen in the way of like superstition?
Oh wow, there's a lot of them out there. It's I think some of my guys at TCU they got to where I think it was that Omaha year where they were a couple of them would literally wear suits to the field every day. Kind of like a business suit, and they wouldn't. A lot of superstitions you don't know about. Honestly, you don't. That's kind of an internal, personal thing. So you don't really know what. Like you can ask our players, they
Really,
don't know. They probably don't know mine.
really,
And you don't want to jinx it, right? I mean, it's
yeah,
superstition.
true.
So but the guys are dressing up. But you get different teams. We've had at Houston that have different team things that they do. Pregame that they're superstitious to them that they have to do it. Or we'll if we go into a ballpark from a hotel and we lose one night, we'll definitely take it down the route. Another day. We've done that before. So all different kinds of things. But you're talking about a game that's full of superstitions. I can tell you that there's lots of them. They can consume you at times for sure.
I love it. No, thanks for that. That's funny. Okay, if you could give one kind of sentence piece of advice to every parent out there whose kid plays baseball, what would one thing that you would tell them be?
I think supportive, like we talked about. You're also you're raising young men, and I think you got to keep that in mind. And baseball is a great tool to do that. And you kind of just follow up what I said earlier. Just if you can get your kids to have great enthusiasm for what they do, they're going to have a lot of success, whether it's academically, athletically, social, all those things. To me, enthusiasm is a key ingredient to success in every area. So I think the more enthusiasm you can inject in your kid and keep the negativity out, you got to hold them accountable. Accountability is just as important as enthusiasm, and you see a lot of people that don't, they don't hold their kids accountable, and you got to run on and off the field. That's one of my biggest pet peeves. We could speed up so many youth league games if guys would just run on and off the field. And you'd be surprised when you get older, that can be the difference in whether you get a scholarship offer or not. What's going to make you stand out, right? I know, kind of getting off on a side deal here, but that's one of my biggest pet peeves is kids just don't get on and off the field, or between plays, run back to your position. If you come watch us play, we're on and off the field pretty quick. Every time we make a play, we hustle back. We try to keep the tempo up. You try to keep the pace, the enthusiasm, and the tempo up. So I think to youth league coaches, hold your kids accountable to get them on and off the field, making them run down the first baseline, run out pop ups, all those little bitty things that all go in kind of the enthusiasm umbrella.
Well, all right, last question. So put your player hat back on. If you could go kind of back in time to the younger baseball player that you were, what would you tell yourself?
Probably to have a better mental outlook. I mean, I think I was pretty negative when I played. I'm a little fiery at times. Um, I would drag at bats and at bats, and I think just learning to go we have a saying in our program, so what next pitch? You can't control what happened before you. And in the college, now we have pitch clocks. You got another pitch coming 20 seconds later. So if you're still thinking about the bad call the umpire made, were you chasing a breaking ball in the dirt, or the error you just made, or the fly ball you just missed, or the base running mistake you just made, guess what? 20 seconds later, here's another ball put in play. And that's what buries a lot of guys, is the ones that don't have the ability to just look forward and see. We talked about that windshield earlier. My team runs, the last thing we do in our stretch every day is we run 200 feet. Okay. And the reason we run 200 feet is the headlights in your car, how far ahead do they see in front of your car? 200 feet. When it's dark, all you can see is what your headlights show. You can't see left, you can't see right, you can't see behind you. You can just see the next 200 feet ahead of you. And that's what we try to get our guys to do is just, so what, next pitch, next 200 feet.
That's awesome. Well, Coach, I've really enjoyed it today. I can't thank you enough. I'm glad we finally got to do this.
Yeah, it's great.
Just want to thank you for being here and good luck. Hopefully you get a little bit of a break in the off season, maybe play some golf or something.
We'll take that break when we get to Omaha and bring that national championship back to the University of Houston.
My man, my man. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again to Big 12 University of Houston head baseball coach Todd Whitting. Coach, thanks. Always a pleasure.
Appreciate you, man. Go Cougs.
Take care. Go Cougs.